So this is kind of like a little bit spontaneous. Even though I do have a lot of notes here, I just felt really called to talk about eclipses. I've been diving really deep into them the past few weeks. I've always had a general understanding, but as I've been diving deeply into them and applying it to my own life and my own chart, I see the impact that this has. I've even with a few people in passing that are very familiar with their chart, when I explain the eclipses to them, they're like, oh my God, that's totally happening in my life right now. Like once they understand like what houses these eclipses have been falling in, I'll explain what that means. Even if you're a novice, like please watch this video. I'm going to simplify like you would not believe how simplistic we're going to get. So you're going to look up your chart. Even if you already have your chart, listen to this part because it's going to be very specific. So you're going to go to astro-seek.com. So that's ASTRO -dash, right? SEEK.com. astro-seek.com. Once you're there, go to the navigation bar, look under free horoscopes. It should be the first sub section there. It says birth chart calculator or something along those lines. Click on it, fill out all the information. If you don't have your birth time, the houses aren't really going to make sense for you. I would encourage you to follow along anyway and just see if there's some polarities that you can pick out, that perhaps you think would resonate with these eclipses. When you go to house systems, so don't finish it yet. Go to the house systems. Once you filled out all your birth info, go to whole signs and then click view chart or whatever that button says. Great, you have your chart, put it aside. We're gonna work on this a little bit later, all right? I'm gonna dive deep now into some information about eclipses because we need the background information in order to start deciphering how these eclipses have been impacting you, and perhaps it resonates with you, perhaps it aligns with you, perhaps it doesn't. We'll see, but I have a feeling it will. So let's explore. Eclipses. Eclipses can be solar, which is new moon energy, on the new moon. Eclipses can be lunar, which is full moon. And they spark great beginnings and great endings. And these great beginnings and great endings are really about bringing two opposite aspects of your life into balance. Two polarities, two sides of the same coin, into harmony. They illuminate the ways in which you're out of balance and what it is that you need to do to cultivate that balance. And sometimes it's kind of like the pendulum, right? Like we're so deeply entrenched energetically, pouring our heart, our everything into one aspect of our life, and then we move to the other pendulum, the other side, and we're like, oh yes, all of this, I haven't been doing this, and I haven't been doing this, and da-da-da-da-da. And then you kind of navigate, oh, okay, now I see how I can bring this into harmony, into center. And then just like with anything, right? Like you might experience that pendulum swing and then you kind of come back to an old way of being. But the point of these eclipses it's like you experience the other side, you experience the swing, and you're like, oh, I never noticed that about myself before. Oh, I see how I can create more balance. And then maybe you swing back to the other side and you're like, I just don't want to deal with that right now, even though now I know all this stuff. It's like, I love the word illumination because that's what it is. It's like once the light shines on something, once you see it, once you see that it's like how you're showing up, there's no way to really avoid it. You might try to avoid it, but it's going to be there. It's going to take up mental, physical, emotional space. So something to think about. So eclipses affects everyone differently, depending on what's going on in your life, your upbringing, how you've learned to navigate the world, your circumstances, the makeup of your astrological birth chart. We're not diving into that again. This is super surface level eclipse. These polarities are opposites, complementary aspects of your life. If you spend too much energy on one, The other one's going to feel depleted, as I was just mentioning earlier. So now we're going to dive in. Going straight in. Look at your chart again. All right, so there's Gemini and there's Sagittarius. They're probably in symbols. The Gemini symbol looks like the Roman numeral 2. The Sagittarius symbol looks like an arrow, right? So they should be on opposite ends of the chart. You're going to notice there's 12 pieces of the pie in the chart. These are called houses. They represent specific aspects of your life. We are primarily looking at Gemini and Sagittarius because that is where these eclipses have been taking place since May. Something to note about eclipses, right? So there's going to be a moment that I go through dates of when these eclipses have taken place and when they are taking place. I'm actually only going through this year. I don't have all the other dates written out. That's okay. I'll write it out in the notes for you. So with eclipses, when they happen, it takes about 3 months for that energy to kind of physically take form. So the eclipse happens. There's this energetic thing that happens. So like it might be coming in through the spiritual, divine, soul level realm, and then it's kind of like spiraling its way down into physical form. For any of you that know chakras, it's like coming in through the 7th and kind of making its way down into the 1st. So it might take about 3 months for that energy to be felt. So something to keep in mind. All right. So you've noted where Gemini and Sagittarius are in your chart. You noted the number, the houses that they're in. Each of these houses are polarities. I'm going to go through a very quick description of these houses. I might go on tangents in some of them because I feel very passionate about some houses in the chart. So starting with the first house. The first house has to do with the self, has to do with the one, the individual. It is the who am I? That house, that topic of your life. Who am I? How often do we like go through that cycle? Who am I? How do I identify? This is the house of beginnings. It represents your body, your vitality, your identity, as I was mentioning, your appearance, your approach to life. So this is kind of like how we physically express the who am I, right? The 7th house. So if first house is 1, guess what 7th house is? It's 2. It is you and the other. It is your partnerships. That could be romantic. That could be business. That could be project related. Any significant one-to-one relationship that you have where there's like some level of interdependence that's required. And I know I use the word interdependence. Sometimes that turns into codependency, or like you're too independent, right? You're too much in your first house, or you're too much in your 7th house. It's codependency. What do we want? We want to find the balance. That's the interdependence, right? It's like the Venn diagram, the 2 circles, right? Like this is you, this is them. The circles overlap a little bit, right? And that little overlap is ideally, that is the 7th house. All right, so we got 2nd house and 8th house. 2nd house, usually, traditionally defined as your resources. I think it's much deeper than that. It is values. It is your values. I say that is the key word for your 2nd house. Why is that the key word for me? Let me describe a little bit more of the 2nd house, and I'm going to pull it back into why I think values is the ultimate keyword, your values. So resources, let's elaborate on that a little bit more, right? That's your income. That's everything that you physically own. That is your job, right? Because your job is the way in which you bring the money in and what allows you to have these physical things. Your work ethic would fall under this, so that kind of ties in with the values a little bit. I'll touch upon that in a moment. Your relationship to the environment and to the earth, right? We get physical resources from the earth. We get our food from the earth. Ideally, we are reciprocating that, how we treat the earth back. I say that slowly because we could always do a little better. Anyway, values. Ideally, your income, your job, your possessions, the way that you interact with the environment and its resources are in alignment with your values. Some food for thought. I'm going to leave that there. 8th house. Shared resource. Shared values. Values. I'm telling you. All right. So what are shared resources? This shows up in various ways, right? So some obvious ones are taxes, investments, inheritances, loans, scholarships, and then some not so obvious ones. Well, intimacy would fall under that too, right? There's a big overlap for any of you chakra people that are with money and emotions, 2nd chakra, right? So intimacy is included in this, right? And this is like the deeper intimacy, not just sex. Sex for fun is another house. This is like the deep emotional intimacy. Psychology would fall under this. Therapist. And death. Death is the other thing, right? Because death will then lead to that shared resource. Like, how is what this person has left behind, how is then this going to be distributed amongst their legacy, right? Like, the word isn't coming to me right now, but whoever's inheriting all of their assets, their property, their money, etc. Shared values. Ideally, where you're putting your money into, how you're sharing money with people, how you're sharing money with partners or your roommates would probably fall under this house too. Ideally, however it is that you're sharing money and you're sharing that intimacy and you're sharing that dynamic with someone is in alignment with your shared values that you've probably cultivated between 1 and 7 into 2 and 8. So you kind of see how the chart builds on each other a little bit too, right? Moving along. 3rd and 9th house. These are kind of, every house kind of has its, like, dynamic has its own little flavor. I like this flavor. So this one has to do with communication. 3rd house is more about the detailed. It's more about like the immediate. And this can kind of extend to neighbors. Like, neighbors falls under this house too, because it's like communication that you, like, little, like communication, right? That you have with others, that you share with others, like texting, like that kind of thing would probably fall under this house if we had to put it somewhere. Siblings, extended family, chosen family, friends that are like family, that would totally fall under this house too. Early childhood development would fall under this house. Let me see if I'm forgetting anything. It's like the thinking mind. Like, like I think this thought, I think this thought, I think this thought. Social activity and interests would also fall under this house, right? Social interaction with your neighbors, people around you. 9th house, we pull it back a little bit more. 9th house has to do with your ideology. It's like the question of what is the truth? What is the meaning of life? And ultimately truth and meaning of life, it's like the same, the one and the same. So these are the ways in which we as a society or as a culture, and of course this is unique to your own culture and society, like how you navigate, how we have put certain beliefs in place that correlate to what this truth is. So what would that be? That would be philosophy, that would be religion or spirituality. Astrology falls under this house. The law, politics, Uh, these are all like these bigger picture things that we feel are either in alignment or out of alignment, right? And we just kind of like gravitate more towards what we feel is in alignment, or you know, it's like, okay, I believe in this religion, but then these are the ways in which like this aligns more with my truth, right? Then we kind of bring in that third house energy, like, okay, this is how it resonates with me. That's how we bring those two into balance, right? The bigger picture, the me. How does this like make more sense to me? You know, how can I bring these ideological things, these big picture things, like how can I think about it critically? How can I navigate this in ways so that I'm in constant question and thinking in it, right? All right. 4th and 10th house. 4th house is the root. 4th house is at the bottom of your chart. 4th house is your home. It's your family. It's like, and your like DNA biological family. Your parents primarily, your ancestors. This is the past. This is origins. This is, let me see, what else am I missing? Your emotions fall under this house. Femininity, not as gender or sex, just the energy of like the feminine. So yin energy. It's your private life. That's actually the key word. Private life for 4th house. 10th house. 4th house is private. Guess what? 10th house is public. 10th house is, this is how I want the world to see me, or how I choose the world to see me. This is my long-term goals. This is my career. This is the future. This is where I'm heading. This is your career. This is your vocation, your status, your reputation. And this also represents masculinity, right? Or the yang energy. The future. Then we have our 5th and 11th house. Let me go back to 4th and 10th so that I describe those polarities. So bringing that into balance, right? It's like we need the long-term goals and the long-term thinking in order to sustain our home. And we also need our space to come back to, so that like our sanctuary space to come back to, and our sense of belonging and our roots to come back to, so that we can feel grounded enough in order to be in that public outward role, right? So that's kind of like that polarity there. Then we got our 5th and 11th. This one's kind of interesting to me. So the 5th house, if I were to say one thing, creativity is that. So what is creation? What is creativity? What is a creative act? So it could be projects. It could be creative projects like art or crafts or whatever it is. It could also be the physical act of creating. So this is the sex house. This is lovers. This is like flings. This is children. So like the act of creating children is creation. It's a creative process. This is the house of self-expression, right? A lot of people express themselves through music, through art. This is also the house of pleasure and joy and our childlikeness, right? Like when we really think about children are so in that creative process, like it's just so natural for them, right? They haven't gone through the work and the responsibilities and the right? Like it's so easy for them to be present and in that creative process and in their joy. And then we have the 11th house. The 11th house has to do with friends, but this is like more like on a, like not friends that you would consider family, not the one that you just call, whenever you pick up where you left off, or you can call and cry to, or call and be joyful with, or like share your secrets with, and da da da. No, this is like more extended. Friends of friends too. These are groups, associations, networks. This could be on a professional level. These are kind of like the people that you interact with, that there is some kind of like give and take. Like they can help you advance in your hopes and dreams. This is also the house of hopes and dreams. And you can also support them in achieving their hopes and dreams in some capacity, right? So if you think about this, right, if we're like overly, and this is also the house of humanitarianism. That's the thing. It's very important about this house. So if we look at it in that sense, right, humanitarianism and creativity and joy and pleasure, it's like for any of you that have done like any kind of volunteer work, or perhaps you're advocates, or that is part of your career, social justice work, human rights work, there is a way in which you can become so depleted, like for the cause, for the movement. You need that joy. You need that pleasure in your life. Like Adrienne Marie Brown, like if we were to combine those two houses together, like they're spot on. Like pleasure activism, that is like the center. That is like bringing it into balance for those of you that are hyper activist. And then opposite is true, right? Like if we're so in like this feels good to me, for me, right? If we get very closed off around this joy is for me, this pleasure is for me, and not share it with other people and interact with other people in that way, it's like then it just becomes like arrogance or self-centeredness. So finding, right, again, like how can I share this joy with others so that we can all be joyful together, but still like, cultivate my own practice, interact with others in that practice, cultivate my own practice, interact with others, right? You see that back and forth. I think it's like a really interesting polarity. Then we have 6 and 12. This is what I'm working on right now. Actually, 6 and 12. And I'll have a personal share after this. So 6th house has to do with work. It has to do with subordinates. Whether you yourself are a subordinate or you're a manager and you're managing a team that reports to you. I hate the word subordinates, but that's just the word that we're using right now. This is also the house of slavery, and I want to make that like clear, like that still exists, and even in the Western world, as privileged as we are in comparison to other countries, depending on how you want to look at privilege, everybody has like their own take on that. Working in order to retire, like working to do the like sometimes that can feel like a form of slave, like, and I mean I don't want to compare it to that, but like I guess you can kind of see how like we have to work, we have to work. This is again like a societal norm in order for us to like get to like, oh, I can retire and relax now. If you want to think of it that way. Agriculture falls under this house, as well as pets and your physical health, right? So this is like a very tangible, earthy house. Then we have the 12th house, which is the house of solitude. The house of solitude, I mean, this is like the subconscious realm. This is culmination and endings, right? So it's like we start at the first house, right? We like kind of go through the whole chart, and then we get to the end, the culmination, the 12th house, and then we kind of like cycle back again. This is how eclipses work. We're like constantly cycling through, right? All these houses. What else can I say about the 12th house? It's mental health. It is mental health institutions. It is incarceration. It's healing. It's our limiting beliefs. It's our expansive beliefs. It is, I mean, I would say like monks would fall under this too, right? So it's solitude, right? So incarcerated folks are in solitude. Mental health institutions, when you're in an inpatient facility, you're in a form of solitude. Even though you might have like some roommates or whatever, you are in solitude. The afterlife would also fall under this realm. And I mean, I think of monks too, right? Like when we're so deep in the solitude, right? Like when we're so here and we're so activated here, right? Like I think of like seventh chakra energy, and we're pulling in information, right, from like our soul self, our divinity, and we're drawing it in, right? And it's like we get this amazing dose of like, oh, like it's like the juicy shavasana, right? It's like that's the information that's pouring in. It could also be like really big realizations like, oh, that pattern of behavior, oh my God, I'm in that dynamic. That's like one of my core wounds. How can I work through this? But sometimes it's like you need to pull yourself out of a situation. You need to go into the opposite end of the pendulum in order to see like, oh, that's the way it was showing up. Right? It's like 12th house energy. And then we can kind of move back in and navigate, right? Whatever that is. So eclipses, right? They take place every 2 years. And the eclipses happen during the two signs, the seasons of those two signs, right? So we like just finished Sagittarius season. So we just went through a set of Gemini and Sagittarius eclipses. And when we go into Gemini season, which is it starts in like late May, we'll go through a set of eclipses again. And then at the end of the year, in 2021, we're going to go through another set of eclipses. Right? So just to kind of give you a sense of when these happened. So June 5th, right? So this is 2020. June 5th, there was a Sagittarius eclipse. November 30th, there was a Gemini eclipse. December 14th, there was a Sagittarius eclipse. So then again, these eclipses are going to continue in Gemini season and Sagittarius season this year. I'll include that in the notes so that in the description so that you have that as well. So while you're kind of diving into this, right, you've probably like already started to collect some information around like, okay, so this is where I see these eclipses have been impacting, right? This is the polarity, this is the dynamic that I can see has been coming through. So personal share, right? 6th and 12th house. When we had, so December 14th, Sagittarius eclipse, I have been for like, I would say since this quarantine began, so deep in work. I've been so deep in the 6th house. I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic. That's where like my codependency, like I have codependency, and a lot of it is intertwined in work. And it's something that I've been navigating for quite some time. It has never been this bad. I had never been this bad. Like since September, I would wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. I'd make my coffee. I'd work. Wouldn't meditate. Was barely practicing yoga. And the only times I would stop was because I had to shower, I had to use the restroom, I had to eat, and even that, like, I wasn't even eating that much. I was in adrenal fatigue, fight, flight, or freeze. If I had to travel somewhere, if my mom came into, the room to ask me a question, I mean, I was nonstop. I would stop around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And that's when I'd start to wind down, and then I'd get up and do it all over again. I was doing this non-stop for 2 months. I hit a breaking point. It was bad. A bad breaking point. I was so unmotivated. I had to force myself to do anything for work. Like, mind you, I still had to do work, right? Like, I'm a teacher. I'm working at a studio. There's still things I needed to get done. This was impacting my work so much. I was starting to even see how it was showing up codependently in my dynamics at work. And it was December 19th or 20th, whatever that Sunday was, I woke up feeling sick. I got tested. I tested positive for COVID. I live with my parents. So I did not leave my room. I was in complete solitude. This was right after that December 14th eclipse. I was so deep in the work. And mind you, while I was deep in the work, it was like a solitude work. Like, I was working by myself. Which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, the only time I would interact with coworkers was when I had to ask them a question about something. But I was doing by myself. I was not asking for help. So I did not leave my room. It was like being in a hotel room, not being able to leave. I was getting room service. Like, I wasn't even cooking. I couldn't expose my parents. They would leave food outside the door for me. So this was about a little over a week that I was in solitude. The first 3 days I couldn't do anything. I was just going through the sickness, going through the motions of that. And then I started to finally really dive in. I did so much journaling. I did so much deep inner work. I began to see those dynamics. I began to see how solitude was necessary for me. Then I started to dive into okay, let me see what else I can learn in the astrological world. I started looking at videos and video workshops and diving deeper into these very complicated techniques. And the eclipses, are a pretty easy one to digest. So when I started diving deep into eclipses, also another array of techniques that it just makes sense that solitude is the theme this year for me. I began to see how expansive solitude is for me, how necessary it is for me, right? How I need to do the spiritual practice, how I need to do the meditation, how I need to really recede in and up, right? In and up, to gather that information and pull it in, and then digest it, and then bring it out, right? And ever since that realization, the moment I wake up, I don't work. The moment I wake up, what do? I meditate. I journal. Maybe I'll even watch a little TV or something. The point is that I have been able to catch myself every time. The moment the energy gets anxious or frustrated, it's the energetic patterning of the codependency with work and dynamics that I have in relationships is this anxious, I don't want them to reject me. I need to make sure I'm doing everything right. I'm such a people pleaser. Oh my God, I need to do it perfect for them. I'm going to mold all my needs around you. And right, super desperate. The moment I feel even a little bit of anxious energy, I literally stop what I'm doing. I stop it altogether. I connect with the emotion. I sometimes will just talk it out by myself, whether out loud, or I journal, I really take a moment to like sit and be with it. I go back to that solitude. And once I feel like I've worked through some of that, then I'm like, okay, do I need something else? Is this enough to process this in this moment? Do I need to go move? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to go like get a bite to eat? Do I need to drink water? Do I need to just do something else altogether? Go be with a friend, like whatever it is, to continue to process and move that energy. And it's like when we're able to finally train ourselves to catch ourselves in that energy, it's like that pattern disruption starts to happen. Um, it's like the pattern will start to change and shift. You know, it doesn't happen like this. I mean, there's some people that I don't know. I'm like those people exist. They do. There's just some people that it's like they need to like just like intellectually understand it, and it's like that's it. They're done. Like they can move on with their lives. It's like, but no, I gotta do all this work. I gotta like process my feels. I gotta like do all this stuff. I gotta go on walks. I gotta like pet the dog. That reminds me of Terry. For any of you know that know Terry, he's gotta pet the dog. Just pet the dog. So anyway, that is a personal share on these eclipses. I'm still kind of navigating through it because it's like it's not until the end of the year, you know, according to eclipse theory, eclipse technique. I'm like super in line with it right now. That this lesson, that this great beginning into really like having that balance will culminate, will like actually integrate energetically. The new pattern will completely integrate energetically. I'm a little excited about this. Just speaking for myself and this new path, new realization. I would love to hear more from you. I want to hear how these eclipses are impacting you. Send me a message, alex@moonalchemy.co. I want to know. You can comment too below. Tell me everything. I want to know. Tell me. And I'll reach out to you, right? I'll also reach out to you. I'll see how these eclipses are impacting you, how you feel about this. If you have any questions, also feel free to comment below. Feel free to email me, right? If you need help figuring out the chart, like I'll put a link to it below. Actually, a direct link to the chart below, so you can access it that way. So yeah, this was just kind of like on a whim. I wrote down some notes, kind of went with it. Hope you enjoyed this training. I mean, I did not expect it to be 40 minutes long. We're like almost at 40 minutes. So yeah, thank you. I'm like so glad that this came through. I'm really excited to hear about your journey, about how these eclipses unfold for you. Yeah, thank you so much. Blessings to you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening.